Hello, it's Mr. Volkman. Welcome to Washington State History video 2.3b. This video is going to be all about the missionaries and the mission complexes that were created in the early 18 to mid 1800s. First off, we need to talk about why did the missionaries come to the natives and come out to the Pacific Northwest. Now, before we can actually answer this question, we have to talk about some background of what was happening religiously in the United States of America. Something called the Second Great Awakening had occurred. And this started around the late 1700s and ended around the early to mid 1800s. Now, the Second Great Awakening, without going into too much depth and detail, was focused on these enthusiastic tent meetings. There was a lot of emotion going around. You had preachers preaching and huge crowds of people coming together, listening to these preachers who were anything but dry and boring. They were very exciting storytellers and preachers of the Bible, and people got converted to Christianity, or they decided to renew their faith in Jesus Christ and to live more like Jesus did. The focus during the Second Great Awakening was on the fact that anyone could be saved and anyone could change their lifestyle. Could be the worst villain, the biggest drunk, most violent person. Anyone could dedicate their life to Jesus and follow him. Now, with this thought in mind, one reason why people came out to the Pacific Northwest was because at this moment Christians wanted to save everyone who were not Christian, to teach them about Jesus Christ. Now, we're going to learn about that. Part of this saving others was also making sure people's culture matched American Christian culture. Another reason why missionaries came out to the Pacific Northwest was because, well, 4 natives actually came back with Lewis and Clark asking for what they referred to as black robes. Now, black robes were Catholic missionaries. And what happened was this story of these 4 native people, in fact, it was 3 Nez Perce tribesmen and 1 Flathead tribesman, their story of wanting to missionaries hit the papers, and during the Great Awakening, everyone went wild going, oh wow, people want us to come preach about Jesus. So many groups answered this call. The Methodist missionaries were actually the first group that made it out to the Pacific Northwest. A man by the name of Jason Lee and his nephew, Daniel Lee, went out to the Nez Perce. Well, they were supposed to. Instead of going to the Nez Perce, they actually went to the Dalles, which you can see is right here on the map. Vancouver, Washington is right about here, and here's Seattle, Washington. So it kind of gives you an idea of where the Dalles is. The Nez Perce were not here, so he didn't go to the Nez Perce. He founded something called the Indian Manual Labor Training School. This gives you some idea about that culture change I was talking about. What we learned about, remember, the coastal Indians and the Plateau Indians were not farmers. They were hunter-gatherers. Now, Mr. Lee here also pushed for American political sovereignty in the frontier. He wanted it to be part of America and that these guys could rule themselves. He also pushed the government to settle the British and America boundary dispute, because at this time, Britain and America were sharing this whole area of Oregon country. Now, he was later recalled, meaning he was asked to come back to eastern United States. There were other missionaries who felt that this man was not preaching and trying to save the souls of the Native Americans there. He was more focused on politics. So right or wrong, he was asked to leave all that he had started to go back to Eastern Washington, where he did actually later die. A side note, this gentleman gave a lot to come out to the Pacific Northwest. He had a wife who died in childbirth, and he later got remarried, and his second wife also passed away. And he also ended up dying, probably because of a lot of the heartache and struggle he had fighting for what he believed should happen in this area. There was also the Presbyterian missionaries. Some of the first Presbyterian missionaries were Dr. Marcus and Narcissa Whitman, as well as Henry and Elizabeth Spalding. Now, Henry was an actual reverend. Marcus was a missionary, but he was also a medical doctor. These people were the first to travel the Oregon Trail by wagon. And in fact, Narcissa and Eliza were the first women to cross the Continental Divide. That's one of our vocab words. They're the first women to come to the Pacific Northwest. Now, the Whitmans went to the Clearwater River where the Nez Perce were, and they were very successful in their missions. They were able to get natives to farm, to have that culture change. The Whitmans went to the Cayuse at the Walla Walla River, and they were not as successful, as we'll later find out. Now, the goals of these Presbyterian missionaries, and really the goals of the Methodists as well, was to teach Christianity. It was also to translate the Bible into the native language so they could read and write. But it was also to teach the American way of life as well. Some of these missionaries really felt that being a Christian also meant living the American way, owning land, farming. They felt that that was the godly way of life, and that tied into Christianity. This here is a picture of what the Spalding place would have looked like. This would have been years later. And this is what the Whitman mission looked like. 3 questions I want you to think about. So I'm going to have you pause the video after I read through the questions, and I want you to really think about this, because we're going to have a conversation about this tomorrow in class. First off, how would the natives feel about this push to change their way of life and culture, and then to convert to another religion? Why would missionaries push this change of culture? If you know anything about a missionary, missionaries, no matter the religion, nowadays, they push a change in your way of life to follow the precept of Jesus or whatever other the religion would be. But with a Christian missionary, it would be to follow Jesus' example. And lastly, I think a lot of people may look at it and go, well, those missionaries had no idea of the culture of the natives. They were just dumb, stupid. Well, that's the easy answer. So the question is the easy answer just that they did not understand the native culture and that's why they pushed it so much? Or is there another reason why these missionaries pushed that the natives should change their culture? Please pause the video, and I want you to think about these 3 questions. Let's talk about the Whitman massacre here. Now, the Whitman mission of Narcissa and Marcus was a way station for those on the Oregon Trail, meaning people coming in to Oregon Territory would stop by this mission, get supplies, see a friendly face after a long, arduous trip. Now, unfortunately, some settlers who came had measles, and the measles ended up coming to the Cayuse natives, and the Cayuse, they died. A lot of people died. Now, they blamed Dr. Whitman for this. They felt that either Whitman was making their kids sick, or Whitman was refusing to help the kids feel better. However, Whitman had medically and just emotionally, you could say, helped the natives for 11 years. He had relationships with them, and there are books out where he was friends with a lot of them. There was a lot of tension build up, and there were a lot of other factors. A lot of it was a cultural shock. The natives would come into the house of the Whitmans without asking, without knocking, and then they would leave. This was not the way of Americans. And it really bothered Narcissa big time because, she's a woman, she was a housewife, and that's really hard to have your privacy invaded like this. Well, unfortunately, what ended up happening, this onslaught of these feelings of changing your culture, of people dying from measles, and Whitman not able to help people, the Cayuse snapped. 13 people were killed, including Narcissa and Marcus, and some adopted children staying with them, and 47 people were held hostage. And as a result, the first Indian War was started. And there's a lot more to read about the Whitman massacre, and I encourage you to do that. I'm running out of time here. Lastly, let's talk about the Catholic missionaries. Father Blanchette, we can see here, went out to the French-Canadian fur trappers who were Catholic. So he didn't really talk to the Indians much. Peter John de Smet, who was a Jesuit priest, he was sent to the natives. And the Catholic missionaries, a big difference is that they allowed the natives to mix their religions, the Catholic religion and native religion. And a side note, some things I read, which may or may not be totally true, is that the only reason the natives asked for, remember, the black robes, because they had heard from natives in eastern United States that there was power that the black robes gave, so that the natives could defeat their enemies. So this could be the real reason why they wanted them. Thank you for watching the video. Please go to Edmodo to answer the question. Hopefully you remember that this is an academic video, not entertainment, so feel free to pause, rewind the video. See you in class.